This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, remember to reboot your system.
Hello, welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow, the sci-fi review and critique show whose ancient civilization we know nothing about and you can't remember the name of well until it shows up later and is ruined by video games. I'm Gefwin, and I'm joined as always by my friend and co-host Dr. Isix.
Hi.
And we are at what is one of my favorite episodes, even though it's kind of a nothing sauce of an episode. It doesn't do a lot. It's just kind of there, but I've always really liked it personally.
Same. It's an episode where there's things that are happening and there's kind of a mystery, and the solution just kind of falls out onto their lap. But still, there's sort of a hints of things in the wider universe that are kind of interesting, and kind of how they deal with the situation kind of shows off some of the the bits of the characters and things like that. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's another one of these like space archaeology episodes.
We've found some ruins and we have to do a thing.
I always have found that kind of an odd little inclusion in space stuff. I mean, it goes back to the original way that space travel fiction is really just explorative ocean, age of exploration fiction.
It's like, we've landed on this foreign land here, and the natives are upset with us because we killed their leader again. But hey, we found some cool temples.
Yeah, which, because of the time periods that some of that was being written and the ways that all of this fiction kind of goes together, you kind of have a mix of the age of exploration, majesty of the sea, looking at various random little tropical islands where anything could be happening, and also this obsession that certain Europeans had with ancient civilizations and possibly advanced civilizations, like the myth of Atlantis, which was popping up just around the Civil War. Somebody wrote a really racist book about it. Things like King Solomon's Mine. You had this ancient jungle temple, etc. Because they were finding ancient temples when they were exploring Africa, and they couldn't explain how it got there because the people who lived there couldn't have built them. That would be silly.
Never mind that they actually did build them and had their own civilization here, but because you guys couldn't figure out how to not be super racist, you just assumed that they couldn't have done it. So,
Yeah. So coming out of that is this idea of these ancient civilizations with secrets we cannot know in the modern world, etc., etc. Very, very ancient aliens conspiracy theory sort of stuff, but they hadn't invented the alien part of it back then. Yeah. That comes in now with things like Star Trek and other science fiction properties, incorporating it into their future mythology where, sometime out there in the galaxy, while we were still evolving as humans, there were these massive galaxy-spanning empires of which we knew not.
Indeed. It wasn't just Cuckoo Khan running around there telling people to build cities badly. There is these grand empires that spread from one end of the galaxy to another, and they had a thing that was a stellar converter, and these other guys could move in planets through hyperspace or something like that, and all sorts of crazy magical stuff that Aldea is like nothing compared to them.
Yep, these guys could move stars. These guys had a something or other magic gun. These guys were the slaver empire that stasis locked technology.
Well, of course, here's me over here is thinking, it's like, well, if these, giant space empires happened at different points in time, the later ones probably ran across the ruins of the previous ones at some point. And would they react the same way that we're seeing here in the in Star Trek? Or are they just going to be like, we're just going to leave this here for later people to find? Yeah.
That's just Mass Effect. Now you're just doing Mass Effect. Yeah, cyclical galaxy empires.
I should really get around to playing those games,
The Legacy Collection, whatever they called it, the Legendary Edition with all three is pretty good.
I'll have to check that out then.
Anyway, we're talking about the episode called Contagion.
Wait, is this a disease episode?
No.
Oh, okay.
I know. It feels like they could have used that for any number of their disease episodes. They always seem to have a name that is related in a way that you really have to kind of think about, rather than something that's like, yes, it's a disease episode, so it's Contagion.
Well, here the Contagion is a computer virus, sort of, kind of.
Yeah, sort of.
Or it just could be ransomware. You never know.
I mean, it's more like ransomware. But yeah, random computer something. So this episode was written by Steve Gerber in collaboration with Beth Woods. I have very little information on Woods. She did some story work in season 3 later on, Sins of the Father, but that's the only other piece of information I could find about her writing. And Gerber is best known as a writer for Marvel Comics because he has the distinction of creating the character Howard the Duck.
Indeed. So,
which is okay in the comics. Just the movie completely ruined the reputation, but the comics were not as bad as the movie.
Yeah, the movie is one of those films that is like, was somebody being like threatened to like that they had to make this movie, and because it's like, yeah, there's just some things that are happening. Some of them are funny, but most of them are just cringy and kind of awful, and yeah.
Yeah. It's before they knew how to make superhero movies,
Yes. It's going to be for kids, but not because it's Howard the Duck, which is not really a kid-friendly, character there. So
And that's it for the writers. Sometimes we got 20 writers on these things, so this is fine. Guest starring, we only have a couple. This is a very on-ship sort of episode. Thalamus Rasula, I apologize, I'm probably pronouncing that a little wrong, is playing Captain Donald Verley. He did a lot of acting in the 70s and 80s on movies like Blackula and Willie Dynamite, which I haven't heard of. I need to find now because that's a heck of a name.
Yes.
He was also on a lot of TV shows like Sanford and Son and What's Happening, and he also played, aside LeVar Burton, playing his father in Roots.
Also in things you've probably never heard of, like The Cop and the Kid and The Fitzpatricks. But I guess one thing I have heard about is Dragnet, the 80s, 90s version. Which, which was a thing. I
remember hearing of that.
Also, New Jack City.
As a radio show. That's been around for a while.
Yes.
And also Carol Seymour, who has played a lot of things. This is her first appearance on Star Trek. And then later she's going to be the alien scientist in the episode First Contact, not the movie. She's going to be a Romulan in Face of the Enemy, a hologram in Voyager, a reoccurring hologram called Mrs. Templeton. She's also been in things like Quantum Leap and Babylon 5, and she voiced characters in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect. We brought back round.
We're right back at where we started here. Nice.
Now that we were talking about it, I need to actually look up who she voiced in Mass Effect, just for my own curiosity.
Well, in Dragon Age Origins, she played several characters. Keeper Marathari, Sister Thealhid, Grand Cleric Elemena. Any of those ring a bell?
She was in... I haven't played Dragon Age in years. She played one of the... I think she played a doctor. Looks like she played the doctor in the Alliance Medical Doctor in Mass Effect. Cool. I remember that character. I've talked to them.
It's also an elder god in Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Oh, that's interesting. Never played that.
Oh, no, that was the movie.
Oh, the movie. Actually, they did make a game based on that movie, but...
Oh, my.
I don't know if she would be in that.
A movie based on a game has a game based off of it. Uh-oh.
It was that kind of age. It was a different time.
Yeah, suddenly I'm having flashbacks to the Legend of Zelda CDI game. That was based off a cartoon that was based off the video game.
That wasn't based... I don't think that was based off the cartoon. I think it just wound up having a similar graphical style.
Maybe. I don't know. This is not a Zelda podcast, so we don't have to answer correctly.
That cartoon wasn't popular enough to have a game based off it.
True. I do remember.
It's not a Zelda podcast, but I own every episode of that cartoon on DVD, so it could be a Zelda podcast.
Maybe we'll have another April Fool's episode someday, and this will not be it, because that would be too predictable now. Anyway.
So that's everything. We can jump in. There's actually not a lot going on in this episode, despite how complicated it seems to be.
Yes, because plot points.
So the Enterprise has received a distress call from their sister ship, the Yamato, because this is before they had introduced CGI into their ship stuff. So every ship in this series had to be one of 3 models.
Yes, and we already had the Enterprise model. As long as we don't let everyone actually see what the registry and the name is on the side, this is just a different ship now. Hooray!
Yeah. The Yamato has gone down in the neutral zone, which you should not be in.
Yes.
Don't do that.
So yeah, someone's been naughty here.
But they're suffering from mass system failures. They've downloaded the Yamato's log before they arrive in order to find clues, possibly. They find a lot of logs from the captain, Verily, who is exhausted and pretty pissed off that his ship is falling apart.
Well, it's like there's another episode in Star Trek Next Generation later where there's like nanobugs infecting everything, and it's kind of like that.
Yeah, they just these computers that are the most advanced things humanity has ever made, running these massive Titan ships that are basically like their own little weapons of mass destruction, coupled with the most advanced exploration craft the world has ever seen, have the buggiest as hell computers.
Yes. And, I guess we could always look back to the original series episode, the Ultimate Computer, where it was so buggy that it was self-aware and decided that it wanted to, be in charge.
Yep.
Yeah. So maybe that's what's happening, and these are just its growing pains in order to, manifest the consciousness.
Wouldn't surprise me. The number of times that happens, they really should just have a protocol for the computer has gained self-awareness.
Yes. Now, that would save them some trouble throughout the series, I think.
So the log also explains why his ship is sitting in the middle of the neutral zone. He started to hear from archaeological expeditions that were investigating the Iconians, legendary world-spanning empire, etc. He has found their homeworld in the neutral zone, because the Iconians had super advanced technology, the likes of which the world has never known. He felt it worth risking a trip into the neutral zone to find the planet before the Romulans did.
Cool.
But
so does this mean you've picked up some, special steel, alloys that are super good, then won't rust forever?
Maybe.
All right.
They could have some of those. I think they already have some of those. So he wants to tell them more, but then the Yamato's magnetic fields decay and it explodes.
Yeah, just like kaboom, and after a little bit of being all like, oh gosh, it's exploded, we see the saucer section kind of floating towards them, and it's disintegrating, but kind of in a weird way, because it's the surface of it's disintegrating, and then there's just the interior structure kind of there. Yeah, it's kind of weird.
It's weird. It's a nice effect.
Yeah, I have to agree. But
it's cool stuff with models.
Yeah, it's very much that doesn't really make sense in terms of how these things are supposed to explode, but cool all the same.
So a Romulan warbird appears as soon as the Yamato explodes. They hail it, and they're talking to a commander, Terrace, who orders them to leave. Picard says they're going to leave when they're good and ready, so screw you, basically.
And for once, the Romulans are not totally it's this is going to be a war immediately, because they might are being slightly reasonable here or something like that. So that's kind of
they're also in a place they're not supposed to be.
Yes.
So Picard wants everyone to explain what in the world just happened, and Geordi tells him that what happened was an incredibly unlikely set of malfunctions happened all at once that caused the failure of the antimatter containment, and then the automatic ejection system that's supposed to prevent it from doing that also failed, and then their secondary systems also failed, and their containment system also failed.
Yeah. So everything just decided to stop working simultaneously in a very inconvenient manner, and thus Kaboom.
Geordi's worried that this might be a fatal design flaw. If they can't find it, the same thing could happen here.
Hopefully, we've not run into any long-term, ship behavioral quirks that have, caused us to be, marginally aware that there might be something wacky going on, and thus, sort of building up a pre, anxiety-inducing sort of vibe to all the situation that, maybe the ship that we have is not so great. No, everything's just going to start going wrong now, as opposed to, over time.
Yeah, your ships might just, wear out suddenly.
Yeah.
Be afraid.
It's like a Geometro.
Picard keeps going over the Yamato's logs, looking for mentions of the Iconians. They found an Iconian artifact with star charts that they said were incomprehensible until they accounted for millions of years of stellar drift. Then he found the location really easily. But then when they got there, they were probed, and then his ship started to fall apart.
All right, so we pulled a Stargate, wind the universe backwards. Yeah, you went to look at your discovered, super planet there, and some bad stuff happened. You got probed, and then everything became uncomfortable afterwards. Got it.
So Picard has stated to find the probe that was mentioned, and they get a visual record of a glowy blue ball that shoots lightning at the ship.
It's like a small moon, but like a few hundred feet across.
Yeah, very small. Picard orders them to set course for the planet where the Yamato was probed. Even with the Romulans following them around, it's probably worth it. On the way, Wesley shows up to get some backstory about the Iconians. They were once thought to be legend. They colonized, or perhaps conquered, many, many worlds with incredibly advanced technology, known in ancient texts as demons of air and darkness, said to travel without ships, appearing instantaneously on distant planets out of thin air.
Well, that's kind of cool. Yeah,
how they got back is the prescient question.
In the Voyager, we do run into a civilization that basically has a similar technology, and we never actually see how they get back from their teleporting across the universe sort of stuff there. But it happens because, we don't just suddenly not have Harry Kim in the series anymore, so...
Picard orders tea from the replicator. This is the canonical first time that he gets his Earl Grey tea obsession.
Mm-hmm. So season 2 begins.
Mm-hmm. But instead of getting tea, he gets a potted plant.
Well, I guess it might be a really strange tea plant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a potted plant tea bush.
Yeah.
And a bergamot. It's tea and bergamot cross-fused into a weird little potted plant.
It's the future. You can do this sort of thing.
So the Ford has figured out what's going on. What's wrong with the ship, anyway. It's not a design flaw. It's the probe. He can't figure out why it's affecting the Enterprise, but the probe caused all the malfunctions on the Yamato.
So there seems to be something was transferred over, Maybe something software related or data related.
Oh no, Data did it. So they arrive at the planet. It's a dead world. Major cities were once here, but they have long since been destroyed by large-scale orbital bombardments a few 100,000 years ago.
Well, I guess that's the end result for most M-class planets. Eventually, they rise up with a civilization, then gets bombed by people that are angry at them for some reason, and thus turns into a tomb world for the rest of the universe. Yeah,
something just happens. That's just Star Trek's end game, as everything gets bombed.
Yeah, that kind of sucks,
Something on the planet is still active though, and it launches a probe at the ship.
I know.
Picard intends to capture it to help Geordi with his research, but Geordi goes, "No, stop! Don't do that!" But the comms have malfunctioned now, so he can't contact the bridge. He starts running, gets to the turbo lift. That also malfunctions, throws him around the room until he's dumped off onto the bridge, like hurled off of the turbo lift.
Yes. The final bit of that where he is literally being sort of tossed is kind of funny because it's obviously he just like jumped out the turbo lift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't have the camera angle quite right.
Yeah. But up until while he's in the turbo lift, they do some cool stuff with like suddenly he's being pressed to the ceiling or pressed to the side, and no, he's lost his visor and being sort of flung around left, right, and all that. So it's sort of like Yeah, okay, yeah, the turbolifts could be potentially a dangerous place to be in a ship-wide emergency. So, yeah, maybe take the stairs.
Yeah. In case of fire, use stairs.
Yeah. Though,
In case
I guess,
of probe,
yeah.
use stairs.
Though, given how many decks the Enterprise has, that's probably not a very workable option if you need to like solve your problem right now.
So as soon as he gets thrown off the turbolift and lands, he goes, destroy that probe, and they do just before it gets to them.
Oh, thank you, Jordy. Are you okay?
Probably.
No?
I also like that since he's flung out of the turbolift at high speed, it does sort of heavily imply that the last journey of the turbolift to the bridge is horizontal.
Yes. Which I guess, according to the Enterprise schematics, some of the turbolifts are like sort of double shafted, I guess. So, like you go all the way to the top and then over one.
So he's able to explain when he recovers that the probe is intended to interface with the computer. It's a computer program, but it's in an alien language. So when it interfaces with a Federation computer, it starts trying to rewrite software that it doesn't interface with and just starts causing some like random things to happen in their machinery.
Dang Telesian software vendors.
The thing is so complicated that he doesn't know what to do with it, but they got lucky because they downloaded it with the Yamato's log, which means that it was isolated and is spreading out, whereas the probe scan affects every system on the ship simultaneously.
Which sounds like a terrible thing, because, all these weird malfunctions will happen a lot faster then.
So the ship continues to disintegrate around them, and Picard decides that the only option they have is to head down to the planet to see if they can find anything worthwhile where the probe launched. So Picard, Data, and Worf head down during a brief window when the transporter is operating correctly.
Hooray! So they're not going to be killed automatically by, the magical transport device that, can do that sometimes.
So as soon as Picard leaves, Romulan warbird decloaks, starts to target and fire torpedoes. The Enterprise's shields won't come online because everything's malfunctioning. They're about to be destroyed. Then the Romulan weapons turned off. And then the shields go up. Then they go down. And then photon torpedoes turn off and on again.
Yep. So apparently we're using all our systems as a blinker here, and I guess that's good enough for signaling that we're in distress.
So Riker hails Terrace, who's very angry but is a bit undermined by the fact that her ship is obviously falling apart in the background. Then another probe launches. Riker tells Terrace to destroy it if she's able, and they are able to destroy it at the last minute. That cuts off communications without even saying thank you.
Yep. Well, in their defense, their communications might be suddenly down too, so,
So this confirms that the Romulans probably also downloaded the Yamato logs, and now they're getting infected as well.
Yeah. So maybe this is a good reason not to be near this planet generally.
So on the planet, they have found a round room with a control console in the center. Picard examines the console and notes a similarity to a lot of ancient languages. Data confirms this and uses various language groups to compile a somewhat understanding of the language, because maybe it's like a root language of a lot of languages that came after, which would make sense, like how Latin is the root language for 90% of the world because the Romans took over everything.
Yeah, and if you go further back, there's Euro independent European sort of root languages that informed the Latin and Greek, and go even further back, you can go to some sort of unknown language that is the root of almost all of them.
Now that would be really interesting. It would be really interesting to talk to a linguist and ask if this would actually work. Like if you took every existing Romance language and assumed that they all came from a root language that you didn't know, would you be able to figure out Latin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Because some things in terms of how languages evolved are a little quirky. It's like, oh yeah, there's been a C shift to some other sort of pronunciation here, and so we got a different pronunciation, and then the spelling changed accordingly, and et cetera, and if you don't have a good vibe of how those sorts of things crop up, especially when you're dealing with alien biology, things could get a little tricksy.
So with his new translation ready to go. Data hits a button that he believes to be manual override. Instead, it opens a big portal in the wall that shows a coastline, then shifts to some Roman-looking stuff. This is probably their Iconians' travel doodah.
Cool. Also, now you're thinking with portals.
I think that this just shows that they were using a Stargate.
Stargate, TNG.
Most of this stuff is set so far apart from each other. Like, there's no particular timeline overlap reason that Stargate couldn't have happened in the same timeline as TNG.
That is true.
Or like Warhammer 40k for that matter. You could have Stargate, then TNG as the Age of Exploration, and then you have the Dark Times, and then the Empire.
And then, eventually someone, uses a time machine to go back to, to long, long ago, and suddenly we have the Star Wars continuity too.
Yeah. So apparently the Iconians could travel vast distances as easily as you'd walk across the room. Some of them might have even left when their planet was being attacked. So they could be out there somewhere.
Yeah. So, like those sphere guys, that some of them end up being Vulcans at some point. There could be some groups of races out there that have a common ancestor or influenced by a common ancestor in some way. Then it might be interesting to sort of explore some of that, and then we realize, oh yeah, like every third species seems to look exactly like humans around here. So, meh.
Well, they all have a common ancestor too. They find that in that really stupid episode about DNA.
Well, that just encourages the convergent to a bipedal form, but to look exactly like humans, I'd suggest maybe it's a little more recent.
So the data also notes that this room that they're in is not really laid out like a war room. There's no weapons, no large areas to stage an army. It's just sort of like a transporter.
Oh, should we get O'Brien down?
Yeah, that would help. That's very possible the Iconians were just attacked because they had technology that scared people. And that the mythology was just used to justify the attacks later.
Because the people that showed up and bombed this planet had spaceships, but the Iconians didn't really need that. They could just be places.
So as they're talking, the portal continues to shift. It eventually shows the Enterprise for a minute, so they might have a way back. Data uses the console to access the power systems that are running the portal, and then he is zapped by the console, and the same program that's affecting the ship is now trying to rewrite his brain.
Oh no, our data's been corrupted.
So now he is blind and has no motor control.
This is maybe not one of your most iconic moments, Data, but it is your most Iconian. Yeah.
So the Enterprise appears at the portal again. They have about 4 minutes between full rotations of the portal, whatever it's doing.
Cycling through various locations to just have a doorway.
So Picard orders everything they have learned to be deleted so it doesn't fall into the Romulans' hands. This seems like a bit of a waste. But
So if we're going to escape here, we can't just take this tricorder with us? Okay.
No. Through sort of broken up sentences because of the malfunctioning, Data is able to suggest that they launch a probe and then lock the probe doors so that it will just detonate whatever power source is powering this room and destroy it.
Oh, hopefully that works exactly as planned, and that the probe situation is not like miles away from the energy source.
Yeah.
Data
talks Picard through the controls, which thankfully the Iconians used a very simple 3-color system for literally all of their buttons.
Yeah, so basically we're playing Guitar Hero on easy.
Yeah, thankfully this was not a keyboard.
Sure, it looks like there's lots of different buttons there, but you only really have to care about the color coding.
Yeah. So Picard orders Data and Worf to leave the Enterprise, and then he will detonate the room when they leave, and the portal shows the Romulans. Then the Enterprise. Worf leaves with Data. Instantly appears on the bridge to take Data engineering, where he seems to shut down. It's all very sad.
Yes.
Then he immediately opens his eyes with no memory of what happened after he got scanned.
And he seems to be mildly baffled, and everyone proceeds to talk like he's not there.
Yeah. His system automatically shuts down and purged all affected memory to get rid of the program, so they can do the same thing. Just reboot the system.
Well, that seems like a reasonable sort of thing. Why didn't we figure this out earlier?
Back in the control room, Picard starts the probe countdown, locks the bay door. Things start to shake and sparkle and spin for some reason.
Yeah, well, you got the sort of control sphere in the middle there, and it has to go kaboomy at some point here to signal that this technology is not going to be salvageable. So why not have it happen now? Well, before the entire room gets vaporized.
Before anything has gone wrong, as far as the thing knows. So the Enterprise reboots its computer, and they're about to beam Picard back up when he is forced to jump into the portal because the room around him is exploding. Mm-hmm. So he disappears from their scanners. Then they find him on the Romulan ship.
Oh, well, that's mildly inconvenient, but also really convenient compared to where he could have been.
Yep.
He could have been in front of the Toronto City Hall, which is one of the images that's used.
It's like, hey, I'm back on Earth. Cool. Terrace is surprised to see Picard, believes that he's the one who sabotaged her ship, but at least she can be satisfied knowing that he's going to die with all of them until he's beamed away.
It's like, not so fast, Sub-Commander. Away with me!
Picard orders them to get away because the Romulans are about to explode. Riker does take a second to give them instructions on how to purge their computer, but then leaves anyway in case they, don't fix their ship in time.
Yes. Have you tried turning it off and on yet? That might help, guys. Bye.
Then they warp back to Federation space, and we do see the Romulans leave, so they were fine.
Yes. They'll surely will not try to beam down and investigate, the ruins that we've exploded in hopes of finding clues to some of the technology here, because maybe they just don't want maybe they're in the mood to pretend none of this ever happened.
Yeah,
but Star Trek will remember, because there will be another gateway in the future that we'll have to deal with, involving an adversary.
They just love gateways. It's their favorite.
Maybe some sort of shadow gate. Hey, no, that's an adventure game.
So that was good. I liked it.
Yeah. Some action, some mystery. Not a whole lot of depth here, but do get a few character moments here. Including like Wesley being used in a reasonable sort of manner. He's not instantly saving the ship, but he's being shown that he's a young person who doesn't quite understand yet that all the people around him that are stiff upper lipping it up, are affected by the deaths of everyone on the Yamato ship there. But they have jobs to do to make sure that they don't die. So
yeah, that wasn't part of the main plot line, so it's hard to fit in. But yeah, he's going like, how can you keep working when you just saw that many people die? It's like, yeah, because if you don't, everyone else is going to die. Warn later.
Yeah, well, it affects us, but we're going to be focusing on this right now, and we'll deal with these things as they are. We have time to do so. So get back to work, and we'll be upset later, I guess. Between episodes, that's the time for it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting the way that they have to write this in order to not introduce new technology into the show that they're going to have to then deal with, is to make the way that the Federation is dealing with the Romulans just absurdly paranoid.
Yes. It's like, oh yeah, we can't just let them have anything, so so we have to destroy it to make sure that no one advances whatsoever, so status quo maintained.
Yeah, we've discovered not only one of the most important historical archaeological discoveries in possibly all of human history, but also technology that could advance space travel hundreds of years at a stroke. But let's blow it up because we don't want the Romulans to get a hold of it.
Indeed. It's like, yeah, we could still keep our spaceships, but we could just teleport them around into different parts of the galaxy now. We don't have to use warp drive because we are able to reach anywhere we need to go instantaneously. It's basically a jump drive. And you could also do it, of course, one person at a time. And, that'll be awesome too. And, we could basically we could bring the galaxy together, expand the Federation, exponentially by making contact with everyone who's chill. And then suddenly, the Romulans, yeah, they're like, sure, maybe a threat to this part of the galaxy still, but, we don't have to like really worry about that. And alternatively, the Romulans get it, and everyone else now teams up against them because, oh no, there's an imperialistic sort of faction here that is going to be going all out trying to attack us, and we only have so much time before we can deal with it before they are able to just walk into our bedrooms at night and phaser us, because that's totally what they're going to be doing, right?
Well, that's the implication.
Yeah. So yeah, there's some, depending on how you want to sell this, there's potentially upsides no matter who ends up with the technology, and it's just sort of going to be a story choice about how they proceed with it. But we have to maintain the status quo. So
yeah, it's just a particularly interesting implication that it is better to never advance, never progress, ruin scientific advancement for generations because you are afraid that your vague, ill-defined enemies are going to get their hands on it and do who knows what.
Yes. Never mind that really there hasn't been any conflict with the Romulans for decades before this point. Maybe this paranoia is a little overblown. It's like, yeah, maybe they have a lot of bluster to them, but given that they've been kind of really isolationist for so long, maybe they're actually like okay with the status quo. Maybe they're not an imperialist power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's maybe things to think about here.
That's neither here nor there, really, because it's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
That obviously it's just a writing choice that was forced. You could just as easily say, we brought some of it back, or we turned it into the research outpost. It's going to take, you could just have an offhand remark of, it will take us years to decode this level of technology.
Exactly. And, maybe, a couple series down the line, someone mentions, the research, from this went into this new doohickey we have that's maybe not as good as the Iconian Gateway, but does help extend our transporter range. So, people across the solar system can now, beam each other around. And that's kind of cool. And it basically means that, any location in the solar system is able to support any others. And so, intersystem trade suddenly becomes super common, and you don't have to have, Captain Okada hauling, their crappy spaceship around anymore.
I actually think it's interesting the way that, like, this has been ruined now by our idea of serialized TV, but the way that they handled this in original series is actually really interesting when you look at stuff like this there, where in this era of television, stuff has gotten to the point where they care a little bit about inter-episode continuity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they'll make enough callbacks, and they try not to contradict themselves too heavily.
Yeah.
But it hasn't yet reached, like, the DS9 thing of everything is a 5-part episode series.
Yes. Continuity is there nominally, but it is not... the plot of the week is not hinging upon what was fully established so far, because it's going to establish a lot of its own stuff and deal with those internally.
Back in original series, when they weren't caring about contradicting themselves in every episode or things, they'd throw whatever out. And then when they wanted to use it later, like in the animated series, it's like, we need to time travel. We've had the Guardian of Forever just sitting here. People have been looking at it. You haven't heard about it again? Because it actually makes sense that someone would start researching this thing, and it would not actually involve the crew of a exploration frontline ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might set up like a whole like research base around it, and the Guardian's like, sweet, I'm not like caught out in the weather constantly. This is nice.
But in this, they have to reset because it's sitcom era.
Yes. If you don't hit the reset button, then you have to like think about what's going to happen when you write an episode.
Now, the other sort of light implication that you get with this episode is this idea of legacy and how you are remembered by generations to come.
Indeed. Are you going to be remembered fondly, or are you going to be the demon of, shadow and stuff?
Yeah, because they had the thing of, since most evidence of this culture had been destroyed in the intervening hundreds of thousands of years, the only information that they had on them was this mythology that had been built up around the idea of them as these horrifying conquerors.
Indeed.
Where it seems like the evidence that they find is that actually they were very peaceful, possibly didn't even have any realistic defense against a spacebound enemy.
Indeed.
And were killed because people were afraid of their technology and for no other reason, and then later came up with the idea of them being horrible monsters to justify what they'd done.
Paranoia got enough to folks that the people with the spaceship showed up, and they're like, oh, I guess they don't have, like, a space fleet or a space station or a planetary shield, so I guess we could just rain death on them until we start to feel bad about it. And so they did.
Mm-hmm. Which is something that happens all the time. That old history is written by the victors idea.
Yeah, and I guess we've in various ways talked about that very phenomenon as we sort of skewer a lot of the narratives that have been built up about history in the modern world. Like, yes, the folks of 30 years ago were like, yeah, totally. This whole colonialism business was like, okay, because it brought people to civilization, in big quotation marks. But now it's like, yeah, all of that is kind of bunkus because, the people that were there before, they had their own stuff going on. They had civilization. It just wasn't the one that you guys want, but you conquered them and decided to pretend that, you were helping them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was just thinking about this the other day because, we have all these things that I was talking about in the beginning, these like mythological ideas about ancient civilizations with high levels of technology because we're too stupid to figure out how someone stacked rocks on top of each other that high.
Indeed.
And
have you tried the wheel? Have you tried ropes?
But like these places did like these historical empires did sort of like not overlap as much as we think they did because the Bronze Age was a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But like Egypt, which we go, oh my God, they couldn't have built most of this stuff. It must have been aliens. How in the world could one stack stones as big as they stacked stones? Like, they were a Bronze Age civilization. We have millions of conspiracy theories about how they couldn't have cut rocks, they couldn't have done this, they couldn't have moved things, etc. But Rome and Greece, which are also Bronze Age civilizations with a very comparable level of technology, we never think twice about the fact that they'd be able to build most of that stuff.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, we got a big temple here that's like fairly massive. Never mind that we didn't, hadn't quite gotten iron to quality that we could actually make good use of. We were able to put this together, and because we are the classical period now, we are, treated like this is totally normal, as opposed to magic that requires some sort of outside intervention or something else going on.
One of the particular reasons that we hit for this is actually a historical thing that we've covered before, which is Orientalism.
Yeah. But, you get past a certain point in either time or location, and suddenly it's this mysterious, magical place lost in the mists of history.
This one, particularly as called out by the book Orientalism, is one of the first times that someone else comes in and gets to decide a culture's history as an academic field. Napoleon sent his armies into Egypt to study the stuff that was there. This is an outside colonial force coming in to write scientific literature about the history of a culture that they are completely disconnected from.
Indeed. Yeah, we're going to have some experts here, but a lot of soldiers too, just in case. And, hey, we're going to run off with a bunch of artifacts. Laters, guys.
Which is how you wind up with a lot of, like, weird ideas about the Egyptians, but the Greeks and Romans, people lived there all the way from the classical period through the Middle Ages into the Renaissance and Enlightenment. So the people there were reading the same things, writing down the same stuff, living in the same areas. There was a full cultural memory of what had happened in between to the point where Latin, the language that the Romans wrote everything down in, had remained a consistent spoken language for the last several thousand years, largely because like we kept writing important documents in Latin.
Yeah.
Like the church kept Latin alive for thousands of years in a coherent form. We chose Latin as a scientific language because it was one that a lot of people could speak that didn't change much and remained consistent. So we had such a continuity that we actually know a great deal more about the history of Rome and Greece because the language that they spoke remained contiguous in the same area that they were living for a very long time. And nobody new came in to write their history. The people who lived there and were the descendants of the Greeks and Romans wrote the history. In fact, to the point that a lot of our history of ancient Greece is actually skewed by the fact that it was written by Romans, which were their own invading colonial force of the time period.
So, some things are maybe a little, biased one way or the other there to make the Greeks, fit the stereotypes the Romans had of the time.
Well, even the word Greece is a Roman word for a smaller city-state that was on the edges of their empire in what would now be like northern Greece. I forget what the landmass was actually called by the people who lived there, but the Romans went down there, found one town, went, hey, everybody here is Greek. Great.
Sweet. They're obviously all part of a massive singular culture here and not, a disparate collection of city-states with varying cultures and values and all that sort of stuff going on there. They're all the same.
Yeah, it'd be like if someone from the east coast of the U.S. started walking the other way, met one dude, went, where are you from? Minnesota? All of this is Minnesota.
Yep. Slight wander back to Latin specifically. Being a thing that has been active for a very long time. I have a book that is written in Latin in my collection of my personal library here, and this is a book that was written by Isaac freaking Newton. The Principia Mathematica there, and that's like one of the foundations of modern physics. Is his writings there, and they were written in Latin because that's what you did, and still did for a very long time until I guess like about a century or more ago now, where people are like maybe we should be a little bit more accessible to non-experts here. But it's very much a thing that has been continuous, so to the point that I personally have a text in Latin. So
yeah. Nobody wants to learn Latin anymore.
Heck, I wonder if I could learn Latin just by reading it and knowing what it's about.
Probably not, but some of it maybe.
Yeah.
Be a particularly limited kind of full immersion learning.
Indeed. I would be able to talk about mathematics and physics of Latin in Latin. Sort of.
Which I guess, since given what we use Latin for, that would be about a third.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to talk biology or religion, but most you'd have a decent chunk of science.
Indeed, though Newton was still kind of in the period where if you didn't mention God every once in a while in your scientific writings, people thought you were against the church or something. So
yes.
Remember Descartes got in trouble because he wasn't godly enough, even though he wrote a lot about mentioning God and here and there. So, But anyway. You're talking about Egypt there, and Egypt has also been subject to invasions from outsiders several times, not just the French, but it was the French there that were very much like, oh, we're going to actually get around to studying this ancient culture, and so you kind of had this problem already kind of present where there's been sort of some cultural disconnects as your ancient Egypt was sort of subsumed into Rome, and then later by the Islam caliphates, and then later by the Ottomans, and all these sort of external forces were kind of coming in and altering the culture to make it very hard to sort of connect back in a very contiguous way to the ancient Egypt that Napoleon and his folks were kind of interested in. So it was like, this is both very hard, and the contiguous aspects of it's also difficult to make a connection with, even for the locals. So if you were even talking to them, it's not going to be much help there because that's a kind of an unreliable narrator given all that's sort of happened since that time.
Yeah, Egypt did have a bit of a blank spot in the middle that people had to figure out later, which did make it more of a non-continuity problem.
Mm-hmm. And there are other parts of the world where there's similar or problems, or places where there isn't so much that has been sort of externally, sort of more recently, in the scale of human history, sort of been poked at in order for the outsiders to start studying their culture without really kind of doing a lot of, oh, maybe we should talk to people who are actually here too. So, but yeah, it is a complicated issue, and generally good thing when you're studying cultures is to not limit yourself to your own background in terms of interpreting what's going on. So, yeah. So how about that Roman flexible glass?
How about the self-repairing concrete? I just read that one. That was really interesting.
Oh, how about the Iron Pillar of Delhi? Or what was it? The Stradivarius, violins, and how they're supposedly some sort of magical technique that went into them as opposed to just fine craftsmanship. Yeah, there's a whole sort of, I guess, collection of things that people claim are lost technologies, but maybe have a more mundane explanation, like maybe someone just made it up. Or maybe someone's just really good at making this whatever here. And other times it's like, yeah, sometimes you try to make something out of a common material and you just happen to get it right in terms of mixtures to make a really good alloy. It wasn't really intentional, but hooray, you now have enough chromium in here that it's not going to rust so easily. Good for you.
Actually, if people are interested in that, there's it's getting somewhat popular, so you may have heard of it, but the Mini Minuteman on YouTube does a series of videos talking about these ancient conspiracy theory things and the actual historical context surrounding them. That's very, very interesting. Like the Dendera light and the battery jars, etc.
Oh yeah. Well, this might be sort of like a potato battery. Maybe? I don't know.
Apparently it might have been a curse.
A curse?
Which I thought was interesting. Like the way that the whole thing's very complicated, but the way the jars were found is misrepresented in a lot of the literature that tries to make them look like batteries, and was actually somewhat common for people to find various kinds of pottery with iron tablets or copper rods in them that were inscribed with curses to one's neighbors or enemies.
Nice. This will both confuse the future and bring darkness to my enemies. Hooray!
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that can be, I guess, up for a lot of interpretation when it comes to historical sort of artifacts, cultures, etc., that maybe we should just kind of step back a little bit and think about what would actually make any sense whatsoever with regards to what we're seeing here. Maybe it isn't battery. Maybe it is just curses.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting in the way that they don't go into it a lot. The way that they talk about like the Iconians is just this random group of people that have this mythology built up around them. It was kind of reminding me of like something that was pointed out to me a while back, that we have a lot of parts of things that are just even in our language historically that refer to these like historical peoples and events that we don't even have a modern context for understanding. It's just in there as part of our language and history. Mm-hmm. Like the word Philistine.
It's like, who are these Philistine peoples, eh?
Yeah, we don't know anything about them other than somebody hated them at one point.
And they were kind of related maybe to this group, but, we can't really rely on them to really give us a good, clear picture of what that was about because,
Yeah, somebody wrote it down in the Bible that they didn't like them, and it's entered our language, and that's most of what we know.
Yeah. Some, connections are a little bit more obvious, like Vandal. That was a group of like a Germanic tribe sort of situation, and they kind of got in some scuffles with the Romans, and then the Romans are like, oh, those Vandals, they're always stealing our stuff and messing up our, cities. So we're going to use that as a slur against them. Yeah.
But you wouldn't know that. So that's the way that we we have all these unthinking ways that we think about history. There's like a quote, I can't remember the exact thing. It's basically history is just a continuous argument.
Yeah. Sometimes those arguments are well put together. Other times they're just name calling. So, yeah.
I think the real key takeaway from any of this is like question anything that's justified for historical reasons.
Yes. People work hard to get history right, but that also means that we got a lot of history wrong. Sometimes that history has been corrected. Other times not so much. So be careful, folks. Be aware. Think about what's going on. And don't jump to conclusions.
So I think that's everything that I had in this guy.
Yeah, I covered some of the stuff I wanted to poke at too. I guess unless I wanted to talk about Earl Grey tea, but I don't really want to do that actually.
It's just tea with bergamot in it. It's fine. I like it.
And I guess I could also talk about the To the Death, that DS9 episode where the Iconian Gateway shows up again, but we could do that later.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the Riker's iconic line about fate protecting fools, little children, and ship state enterprise. Do you know what that's referencing?
Actually, no.
It's referencing Otto von Bismarck, the German prime minister from the 19th century who we're in charge of Prussia here. Maybe we should be in charge of all of Germany. Yeah. Sounds like awesomeness. So we're going to engage in realpolitik in order to do it. And, eventually he gets Germany united. And then he's like, let's do these other things and not have pointless wars anymore because we need to centralize our state. So he gets fired. And then later World War I happens. But anyway, the quote from him is, God loves children, drunkards, and the United States of America. Because I guess, thinking about it in terms of, a European, well-off aristocratic sort of person there, is that, there's this country over there that makes no sense compared to all our autocracies here. That's weird. Anyway, that's all I got.
Yeah. They really had to torture that quote to get it to fit.
Yes.
So luck favors little children, Enterprise, and the galaxy's favorite game show.
Woo! Hey everybody, welcome to the Galaxy's favorite game show, where we got some prizes to hang out because we've gotten some points racked up, but some of our contestants, their point meter here is saying 15BQ 12.8. I'm not sure what that means, but we can't quite count it as correct, so we're going to go with what we can figure out as far as the other prizes and contestants are concerned. Anyway, the first one to hand out is the Even in the Future Nothing Works, because goes to the Enterprise, which has been infected by the invasive program, and I guess the Raw wins Yamato as well. So what do they win, Gepwin?
Hey, this is boring, but they win a independent, isolated backup system. They still don't have these. It would have saved their asses so many times across every one of these series. They never even have a basic, this will keep the ship running while we shut down the main computer thing. Ever. It's why?
Maybe there's a reason later that O'Brien talks about, he wouldn't be, feel safe unless there's a secondary backup because he's had to deal with all this without that. So our second prize is the Freaking Wizards prize, which goes to the Iconians for having magical technology. Specifically, the super magical door of go anywhere you like. What do they win, Gepwin?
They win having traveled over through the magic portal over to the magic world, because they could have had just staves and whatever. They just went over there and became the magicians. I think everything that's unexplained in Star Trek should be the magicians from hell.
Megas 2, the wizard did it explanation. I like it. Our final prize today is the Menacing Geometry Prize, which goes to the Iconian Probe for being a spooky sphere that zaps everyone who drops by with, invasive program vision or something like that. What does it win, Gepwin?
It wins some CGI, because, they obviously just grabbed a ball and painted it blue because they didn't have any budget. They could have morphed. It could have looked like something. It could have been an interesting flying thing. That's a ball. This is a ball. Let's go.
Just a ball that shows up and goes zap, and then you're having a bad time. Yes. Making it look like, an actual probe could have maybe actually added a little something here. Anyway, that's all I got here, Gepwin. Can you still read me? My signal's breaking up.
Oh no, it's unlikely set of malfunctions has all happened at once, and now Zix has exploded.
Kaboom.
Oh well, next time I guess I'll be hosting alone on the Galaxy's favorite game show.
Woohoo! Well, if that's the case, sorry. Because, the next episode is, it's kind of interesting in some ways, but it's also kind of lame.
All right. The next episode is the Royale, which is remembered for being one of those really weird what the fuck episodes.
Yes.
There's going to be very little to talk about. There's not a theme. There's barely much story. There's nothing really happening. But just as one of these, you beam down to the planet and what the fuck happened, it's a very interesting sort of old school episode for that.
Yes. So I guess if you want some, TOS-esque sort of nostalgia stuff going on here, there's that. But I guess it is very tropey in both the thing that they're trapped in as well as the episode itself in terms of Star Trek tropes.
Yeah.
It's not quite a holodeck malfunction episode, but it basically is. There's, we got to solve a mystery, but, it's like a quirky mystery, so you have to, stretch your imagination to try to figure out what's going on. There's, Troy's like, I know that they're alive because, empathic stuff here, and, that's just something that they do sometimes. And, yeah. It's like we see the various components before and after this, so it's sort of like it's just kind of there for me. Yeah. It
reminds me of that thing that people have been pointing out that just saying here is an annoying writing trope that everyone uses and then doing the annoying writing trope that everyone uses is not actually a joke.
Yeah.
It's just you doing the thing, but mentioning it.
Yeah, there is, as I say, lampshading the tropes, and then there's the trying to lampshade it too hard, where it's like, oh, you've put the lampshade on yourself because you're just making a fool of yourself now by basically falling into the same things that causes this thing you don't like to be a problem. So, yeah.
But we'll cover it more next time because I do feel like there are some things in this episode that really show off the strengths of this show.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is basically original series beams down to the cowboy planet.
Yes.
But it's way better, and the reasons that it is way better really play into why this show was just so good and successful.
Indeed. So, yeah, despite the things that I don't like about it, it does, it could have been a lot worse if it wasn't as strong a show overall. So,
yes. So at least we'll be able to use it. See, it's a good example. You look at what this show did wrong, and it reveals what the show did right.
Yep. Which is a very fun way to sort of handle analysis. Hopefully I remember to focus on that when we record next.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, next time, I don't know, go gambling or something.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, Lame Tropes, the episode. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter at IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.